of all, thank you, first of all, for being with us. I'm going to introduce some of the key players at the Disability Law Center who are going to be working on the legislative stuff. I'm going to give you a few facts and figures about the upcoming 2021 session. Tell you some of the big issues that we are going to hopefully see and hopefully that we know about. And then I'm going to ask you for your help to tell you, to ask you if you know about things that you expect to happen in the General Assembly that maybe we don't know about yet. And then finally, I'll let you know how to stay in touch with us and how to let us know about things as the session goes along. My name is Colleen Miller, and I am the Executive Director of the Disability Law Center of Virginia. The Disability Law Center of Virginia has a federal mandate to educate policymakers about the implications of their decisions. So that is not the same thing as lobbying, at least in the minds of federal policymakers, federal guidelines. It's not the same thing. And we take our responsibility to educate policymakers very seriously. When there is a bill that comes up that maybe has nothing to do with people with disabilities, but we think there's a potential that it could happen during amendments or during a discussion, that there could be some implication, we try to follow those bills as carefully as we can and let the policymakers know if they're starting to step into territory that could impede the rights of people with disabilities. We do engage in lobbying, but on a very limited basis, and we do not do any lobbying with our federal funding. We use discretionary funds, donations that people have made to the Disability Law Center in order to do the lobbying, the very limited lobbying that we do. I do a lot of our legislative work during the session, but I'm also joined by two outstanding senior advocates who assist with the legislative work. And I believe they're both on the call right now. Jenny Shatine is a senior disability rights advocate who has been doing this with me for, I don't know, Jenny, 6 years now?
Yes, it's been, absolutely.
Yep. And contrary to the way I approach legislative work, Jenny actually likes doing legislative work. So I'm happy to have somebody who enjoys this work much more than I do. This year, Jenny and I are joined by the first time with a new senior disability rights advocate, Rhonda Thyssen. And Rhonda, are you on the call?
I am.
Okay, hi. Rhonda's done legislative work in previous lives, but this is going to be the first time that she's doing it on behalf of all people with disabilities and on behalf of the Disability Law Center of Virginia.
And I love it too.
Yeah, and she loves it too. I don't understand these people. So thank you, Rhonda, thank you, Jenny, and thank you to all of you who are actively involved in the legislative session. If I had the ability, what I wanted to do is to create a poll, and I think it was not enabled for this session. And I would have asked you what your experiences were working with the General Assembly. Are you brand new to this? Have you done a lot of work? Are you somewhere in between? I recognize some of you on this list as people who have actually pretty active profiles with the General Assembly. So thank you, and I appreciate the opportunities that I get to work with all of you on that. All right, so let me just tell you some of the sort of facts, basic facts about the legislative session. The session starts on Wednesday at noon. And at that time, the House and the Senate will adopt an operating resolution. And that's when they will set out any kind of parameters for how this session is going to go. They've already established some limitations on how many bills any senator can file or any representative to the House of Delegates can file. But the operating resolution will establish some deadlines for when crossover will be, for when the session will end, for when the budget must be submitted, and some other deadlines along the way. Crossover is typically a midpoint in the session, And it is the point at which a bill that has begun in one house has to be completed in that house in order to be moved over to the other house. So if a bill starts in the Senate, all of the work on that bill must be done by crossover in order for it to cross over to the House. The reason why that's a really important date for us is by that point, we tend to have a pretty good idea of what bills are in contention, what bills are really going on. Up until that point, sometimes we cannot keep up with all the bills that are being filed. And because of that, we really do rely on you, our friends in the public, to let us know about things that maybe we have not seen yet. We've got a little bit of an advantage this year because both the House and the Senate put limits on how many bills each member can put in. And they're pretty strict limits. I've heard different numbers, but it's fewer than 10 on both sides, which means that they had to be pretty selective about what bills they were going to support. And it also means that for the most part, we think all of them are already in the drafting process, and many of them have already been listed on the Legislative Services site. So the session starts on Wednesday. Under our state constitution, it is supposed to go for 30 days. This year, we expect that the deadline will be extended. Typically on a 30-day session, the legislature decides that it's going to meet for 45 instead, and they give themselves a little bit more breathing room to get all the work done that they need to do. We've had some conflicting messages about whether they would do it this year or not, but late last week, Governor Northam announced that he was going to extend the session to 45 days if the legislature did not. So it looks pretty likely that this session will start on Wednesday the 13th and go till the end of February, which is probably good news because the legislators can then approach the considerations a little bit more carefully, a little bit more thoughtfully, and not feel the rush of a really tight deadline to get all the work done. So because of the COVID crisis, the legislature is meeting in a very sort of unusual way. The Senate will be meeting at the Science Museum of Virginia. They meet there in person, and they meet at socially distanced tables and usually wear masks. Not always, but they do try to keep a good distance from each other. And the entire session will be streamed, will be shown virtually using a technology that Legislative Services has a contract with. It is not the greatest technology. And I will tell you right now that the captioning that is available through Legislative Services is very, very poor. So if you rely on captioning to participate, it will work better for you if you have your own captioning technology to be able to follow it. So the Senate will meet at the Science Museum of Virginia. And we don't know yet whether they're going to have any in-person meetings with constituents. We have been given some different information about that. There's a current court case going on about whether the Pocahontas building, where they typically meet and where all their offices are, whether that building will be open to the public or not. And until those things are all resolved, we don't know whether they will have any in-person meetings with constituents. I think you should feel safe if you are wanting to meet with your senator. You should feel safer trying to set up a virtual meeting with them. I think some senators will be willing to do in-person meetings, but my guess would be the vast majority would prefer to do virtual meetings. The House of Delegates is meeting entirely virtually. I believe that the way this will work will be that the Speaker of the House and the House Clerk staff will be in Richmond, will be at the will be at the Capitol building, but every other member will be meeting from their home office and will be meeting using Zoom or another technology like that. So that means that in-person meetings with your legislator will only be possible in the home office. So if you want to meet with somebody while you are in Richmond, if they don't actually live in Richmond, you won't be able to meet in person with them. So hopefully by now we are all comfortable with our legislative or with our virtual technology, so that if you do want to interact with legislators, you've got a way to do that. You could always use the old-fashioned telephone as well. If I could, I'm going to, I think I can do this. I'm going to share with you, maybe I'm not. I was going to show you the screen for, yes, there it is. Okay. I'm going to show you the Legislative Services website. I think I want to, there it is. Okay, so this is a useful tool for you if you are interested in following what's going on with the General Assembly. The website is lis.virginia.gov, and there's a lot of really useful information on this site for you. As I told you, your best bet to try to reach members of the General Assembly would be by email or by telephone. And the way you find out what that contact information is, you can go to this main page and click through to members of the General Assembly. And then you can click to your specific member. This is Senator Adam Ebbin. His email address is here and his home phone number is there. The Alexandria phone number on the right-hand side would be a better one to use than the, well, no, let me correct that. For Senator Ebbin, it might be better to use the Richmond office because they will more likely be working out of the Richmond offices. But if you're trying to reach somebody in the House of Delegates, who might you be trying to reach here? Let's say you're going to reach Dawn Adams. It's better to use her home mailing address, phone number. Well, look at me, I picked a bad example because it's the same phone number for both. Just keep in mind that the delegates are not coming to Richmond. So if you want to try to reach them by telephone, using their Richmond phone number is usually not going to be helpful. Okay, before I talk about some of the other issues, some of the issues that we're hoping to face this year, let me just take a breath and see if anybody's got any questions about any of the stuff I've covered so far.
Colleen, can I give a tip?
Sure.
So for people that are really into this or who want to have the numbers and information about their legislators available at all times, Verizon has a phone app, which is called Virginia State Government, or I think, and it's basically provides contact information, photos, mailing addresses, and everything for all of the members of the General Assembly. So if you go to the App Store for Apple or to the Google Play Store for Android, you can download that app and they keep it updated every year. And it's actually really nice to have.
Thanks, Rhonda. That's a great tip. I don't see any questions in the chat box. Let me tell you, we'll start moving along then and talking about some of the issues that we expect to see this year. But feel free to come into the chat room and add a question if there's something that I've covered before or am covering now that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you, and I'll go back and cover it again. There are a number of really big issues that we anticipate seeing this year in the General Assembly, and one of them that might be of interest to you is the employment of people with disabilities. So first of all, we expect that there will be a bill introduced that will create a program for state employment of people with disabilities to give essentially a hiring preference or a special preference for hiring people with disabilities in state government. As you probably know, the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is significantly higher than it is for the rest of the population. And that's not just an outgrowth of COVID. That has been true since the data has been tracked. So we're really happy to see that there may be some state government approach that will give some preference to hiring people with disabilities and give people with disabilities some actual job experience that they might not otherwise have. Another bill that we've already seen that has been submitted by Delegate Mark Sickles is to extend state protection to people with disabilities against discrimination in employment. Last year, the legislature passed a massive bill that they called the Virginia Values Act that gave protection for people against employment discrimination, and it offered that protection to all groups you can imagine, except for people with disabilities. Our hope that was a typo, and we are now proceeding to just have that word reinserted into the Virginia Human Rights Act. We're going to take the opportunity, working with the Attorney General's office here, to also clean up some confusing language that is in the Virginians with Disabilities Act. So we've got great allies on this legislation, and hopefully this will go through this year just as smoothly as any other disability protections would go through. Those are a couple of things we're expecting to see in the arena of employment with people with disabilities. Another thing that we're expecting to see some legislation on, but we don't know much about it yet, is concerning a practice called mandatory outpatient treatment. And that is a process that exists in state law for a court to essentially supervise somebody with serious mental illness and encourage them to receive treatment that they might be reluctant to receive otherwise. Right now in Virginia law, the program, although it's called mandatory, requires the individual to agree to tell the court that they will cooperate. And although that sounds a little bit contradictory, try to imagine what the opposite of that would be. If the court orders treatment and the person doesn't cooperate, does that mean that the treating professionals will hold them down and inject them? Does that mean that the treating professionals will force the medication down their throat? You know, if they're not going to cooperate and they're ordered to this treatment, what does that mean? Virginia has split the line a little bit. They call it mandatory treatment, which means that a court is going to be behind it. A judge or a magistrate is going to be behind it. And that can be typically pretty intimidating for people with disabilities. But it does require that the person has to express that they will cooperate with the treatment. We are concerned that there may be some proposals to eliminate that cooperation, and that we will instead be facing the scenario of what does it mean if somebody is ordered to treatment and they don't cooperate. The legislative body that may be offering this treatment is going to be meeting this afternoon and developing their final legislative agenda, and we'll have an idea then about just how far they intend to go with that. Jenny, is there anything more about mandatory outpatient treatment that people should know?
No, I think you covered it really well. I think the only thing that's important for us to note is our position is that forced treatment is not something that we support, that we know that recovery is something that the individual needs to choose and be, an autonomous part of choosing their path forward.
Yeah, and I mean, from a really practical standpoint, forced treatment does not work long-term. If someone is compelled and against their objections to undergo a treatment regime that they don't agree with, as soon as that compulsion goes away, they'll stop. And in some cases, that can mean a really serious backlash. So yeah, we really are fully behind any effort that enhances recovery and enhances self-determination in the pursuit of mental health treatment. Another area where we're expecting to see a lot of legislation concerns voting rights. And we've already seen a couple of bills put in right now. Senator Favola has introduced a bill that will eliminate the requirement for somebody to get a witness on an absentee ballot. During the COVID crisis in particular, the requirement to have a witness was in some cases very dangerous for people who were voting absentee and living alone. And so this legislation that the senator is introducing will permanently remove the requirement that you have to have a witness to an absentee ballot. We're also seeking legislation along with Delegate Price to require some greater notification about the right to access curbside voting. In state law right now, people with disabilities and people who are over 65 can request a ballot be brought out to their car if they cannot go inside the building. However, most voting locations require you to go inside the building to ask for it to be brought out, which, as you can imagine, negates the entire right. If you can go in to ask for it, you probably don't need to have it brought out to your car. What happens typically in places is that if somebody needs a curbside ballot, they'll ask one of the folks who's standing outside campaigning for somebody on the ballot to go inside and ask for it. And that's kind of illegal because typically those people have a lot of, buttons and t-shirts and stuff like that, and they're not supposed to be going into a polling place. The individual can also ask a total stranger to go in and ask them to bring it out, which is putting that voter in a real disadvantage. So our legislation is just simply asking that every polling place has to post information outside about how you request a ballot. Most locations will do that by posting a cell phone number, or we've seen locations where they have designated parking spaces for curbside balloting, and they'll have somebody stationed at the door to watch when those spaces are occupied. But we are looking to have that requirement be placed into code. We're also seeking some legislation to help the Disability Law Center of Virginia monitor incidents of abuse and neglect a little bit more effectively. Right now, providers who work with the state are required to file in a database anytime there's an allegation of abuse or neglect of a person with a disability. And the Disability Law Center is seeking access to that database. We already have access to that database for reports about medical incidents. We're just seeking access to the allegations of abuse and neglect. We use this, and just to give you a heads up on this, there are thousands of those reports that are filed, and we have no pretense that we will investigate every incident of abuse and neglect. What we do is take the incident reports that we have, we put them in our own database, and then we do what's called trend analysis. We look for patterns of medical incidents. We look for patterns of potential abuse or neglect, and try to bring those patterns either to the attention of the department or to the attention of the provider itself. This was really helpful to us in the height of the COVID crisis, because we were able to track outbreaks of COVID in group homes, in children's psychiatric facilities, and in assisted living facilities. We were able to track those outbreaks, and we were able to pursue some allegations that seemed really shaky. One place where a provider said that they were going to quarantine infected individuals in the basement. We were very concerned about what that meant, and what kind of access to fresh air and other things that the individuals stuck in the basement would have. We identified one provider where there seemed to be an extraordinarily high number of deaths, and reports that the treating doctor there may have been using an experimental medication on the individuals who ultimately died. So these are the kinds of things that we look for when we do have access to these reports. We are hoping to get access to the full database and to be able to look for allegations of abuse and neglect as well. So those are some of the things that we are working on. I'll tell you that I can start to go on about other issues that we expect to see some problems or some issues with. But what I'd really like to do is kind of open it up to any of you, and you can just take yourself off mute if you want to, unless it becomes a free-for-all. Take yourself off mute and let me know if you are hearing about anything that you think might be going on that the Disability Law Center should know about. And Rhonda, has there been anybody in the chat room bringing anything up?
Not so far.
Okay.
Colleen, this is Harry Gawanter.
Hi, Harry.
Just to let you know, the Medical Society of Virginia is going to be pushing to have full parity allowed for involvement of audio only telemedicine. During the special session, things were made to be basically equal access to payment and services through video and audio. That was passed in the special session. It is, they left audio only out due to a number of political considerations, and they're going to be coming back with that in the session to have that also encoded so that any people who have problems with video access can still receive appropriate medical care.
That's great. That's great. And just let me make sure that I have some understanding about this. This would benefit people who have either limited access to technology or limited access to high-speed internet, who may not be able to use video and would access telehealth using a cell phone or a telephone or something like that.
Right. And again, you know, from the MSV standpoint, there are negative incentives at the moment for healthcare providers to interact on an audio only basis. And this eliminates those barriers.
And I can imagine one of the disincentives is that there may be a caricature drawing of the doctor that is posted on the website instead of an actual picture.
That is true. That would be a significant barrier.
It's a great drawing, though, Harry. It's a great drawing. Great. Thank you for letting me know about that. Anybody else know of anything that the Disability Law Center should be following or that you're worried might be happening? We've got a couple of people on the call who are from independent living centers. Wondering if you all are seeing anything in particular.
You're
Frank?
asking me, Frank? Frank Hayes?
Yeah, Frank, if you know of anything.
We're not seeing anything. Only thing we're going for this year is, as always, trying to get statewide service for SILS, because there are still some unserved and underserved areas. And
Right.
we've gotten patrons for bills for that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Frank raises a great point, is that a lot of what the legislature does that impacts our lives is done in the state budget. And that is something we are also going to be following very carefully. The legislature can adopt amendments to the budget that are language only, that have nothing to do with money. And sometimes that's where some really serious things go on because it follows a different legislative process than it would if it was trying to amend the code. The budget is an enormously complicated document to try to follow. This year, for example, there is some funding in the budget to increase the number of beds in state psychiatric hospitals, even though our state psychiatric hospitals have hundreds of people in them who are ready for discharge, and the state can't seem to move them out. So rather than help those people move out, the state wants to just create more beds in those hospitals. So that is something that we are trying to help policymakers understand is a really bad idea. Kim, were you going to say something?
No, I agree with Frank. I'm looking at our the SILS legislative agenda, and that's pretty much it. However, I did want to ask your help for understanding with anything that has to do with education and the restraint and seclusion and what's going on in that area.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Thanks, Kim. That's great. As far as in the General Assembly session and the legislative session, I don't think we are going to see much around seclusion and restraint. As you may know, the Department of Education just issued brand new regulations limiting the use of seclusion and restraint in public schools. And those regulations took effect as of January 1. And the Disability Law Center is reviewing a lot of local school districts' proposed policies to make sure that they are in compliance with the regulations. Because we are a bunch of cynical lawyers, we expect that a lot of school districts are going to try to find loopholes to those regulations and try to find other ways to continue to restrain kids with disabilities. So we're also going to be looking for cases that come along that demonstrate some weaknesses in the regulations. With so many schools being virtual right now, we're expecting we're not going to see many of those cases until more kids are going back in person. The Department of Education issued regulations a number of years ago that limited the use of seclusion and restraint in private schools. Those are very, very poorly enforced. And we certainly would support any kind of legislation that puts more responsibility on the Department of Education to enforce them better. But as far as I know, I haven't seen any proposals for that kind of legislation. And they're, the place where seclusion and restraint is most often used is in our state psychiatric hospitals. And as far as I know, there's no proposal to limit or otherwise regulate the use in the state psychiatric hospitals.
And I think there is a group of people working on that, on the restraint and seclusion, saying that it had not come far enough, that the last year's legislation or this year's, whatever, that took effect in January, does not go far enough as far as the restraint and the seclusion, notification of parents and so forth and so on. So
yes, so the regulations absolutely contain some compromises in order to get them through. As you might imagine, the schools many schools were violently opposed to any kind of regulation, and really brought a sort of like, don't tell us what to do kind of attitude to the table. So there were a number of compromises that had to be made in order for those regulations to even see the light of day. And it actually was not last year's legislation, Kim. I think it was 2016 is when that legislation was passed. The regulatory process is painfully slow. As I said, we expect to see abuse of those regulations, and we will be pursuing those abuses and taking them to the legislature. But it's hard to fix something where the legislature is going to say, this just got started, how do you know it's not going to work? So that's why we really don't expect to see anything serious this year on it.
Heather has her hand up for a question.
Go for it. Can you
Hi, thank you. I was wondering, and I'm so sorry I joined late. I'm hoping you haven't already covered this. I wanted to find out if you've had any involvement with housing regulations that address the new shortage that's going on because of COVID. particularly in the DC area. I'm educated, employed, and disabled, but have been unable to find housing that's appropriate for me. And the prices just keep climbing. And thank you.
Well, that's a great issue, Heather, and thanks for raising it. I will look for, I'll take a look to see if there's anything. I haven't seen anything yet that would necessarily speak to that, but that doesn't mean it's not coming. And it also doesn't mean that I maybe I've just missed it. But you're interested in the issue, not so much of accessible housing as affordable housing?
Well, I'm interested in the fact, well, I'll just tell you, I've had 2 concussions and a mold exposure. And what I'm finding is that there's so few homes available out there and they're completely unregulated. No one is inspecting these homes before they put them on the market. I would say a good 50 to 75% of them have active water damage going on. And like I just toured one on Saturday that had black mold growing underneath the sink, and another leak going on at one of the double windows in the bedroom. And when I brought it to the property manager, they said, well, the landlord might not want to fix that. So with the already reduced quantity of housing out there, or availability of housing out there, and the high prices, in addition, we also have to deal with the fact that the housing is unsafe, it's unhealthy.
Right.
And I tried calling the governor's office, and they pretty much just kind of shuffled me off to housing. And I was like, no, this is a COVID issue. And every real estate agent I've talked with has said that my biggest competitor right now is Section 8 housing vouchers, which apparently the housing vouchers go up to $3,000. And I'm employed, I make really good money, and I can't afford that.
Right.
And how am I competing with somebody who isn't even working? And to the point where I can't get housing. And then on top of that, they said that they think that a lot of people are moving to the area from places like New York and California, where people have a ton of money, and it's all and the availability is low already. So everything is driving the housing prices up and availability down. And I've literally been looking for a year. I cannot find anything, and it's got to be quiet because I can't sleep now with the 2 concussions, and it has to be clean, and I just can't find it.
Right. So, Heather, you're calling to our attention a problem that is probably not really ripe for a legislative solution, because the problem of housing, particularly for people with disabilities, is enormous. And we have a serious problem with housing that is in no way accessible to people with mobility impairments. There's a group in Charlottesville that has been promoting more accessible housing options. And I'm sorry, I can't think of the name of that group. But if you'll shoot an email to info@dlcv.org, I'll track down the contact information for that group. And that might be somebody that you could associate with and get them to start to incorporate concepts such as mold sensitivity and multiple chemical sensitivity into their concepts for what they consider to be accessible housing. If that's
sure, and noise would be a big one.
Say it again.
And noise would be a big one too.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
But it's getting bad now that you have to, because there's so few places to look at, you literally have to apply for everything you're interested in and spend all that money for applications just so it doesn't get rented out from under you. And even that doesn't guarantee anything.
Right.
Right. Anyway, I could talk all day on it, but I'm sure I'll send
no,
you an email.
Heather, thank you so much for bringing that up. The Disability Law Center doesn't have any separate funding to work on housing issues. So I would say that we're probably not the most knowledgeable about how to address these issues. And that's why I think I'd like to hook you up with some people who might have better knowledge about that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Colleen, we've had some traffic in the chat room. Amanda Ritchie says she works for Brain Injury Association of Virginia and is interested in knowing more about our work around improving access to government services for folks with TBI.
And that's Amanda. Amanda, I believe that Brain Injury Services or the Brain Injury Association has been trying to push for a Medicaid waiver around traumatic brain injury. I do not believe that that got included in the budget this year. You might know more about that than I do. Honestly, Brain Injury Services, Brain Injury Association seek that funding every year. Amanda, what we got to do is we got to organize better and get it in the budget next year. If we hope to get even like a toehold on that issue. I believe that the Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services has asked for just minimal increases in some brain injury funding services. There's every year you hear about the budget, but this is not the year to take on something big. This is not the year to take on something expensive. And that might be true this year because of the COVID related economy. But honestly, legislators say that every year. It doesn't really matter whether there's COVID or not. They always say this is not the year for something expensive.
Colleen, Caroline also had a point about the housing issue. She lives in a large apartment complex in Crystal City, and it's very expensive. It's just been bought to have its units moved into an affordable living level. That has just happened, but with Amazon moving into Northern Virginia, it squeezes out people with lower income and of course people with disabilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's asking about Crystal House and whether that can include allowances for disability. Caroline, is that your complex, Crystal House? So
Yes.
if they bought that for affordable housing, I think Colleen, isn't there a requirement that a certain number of units be, or a certain percentage of units be accessible under the 811, or I can't remember which HUD section it is.
Yeah, this is where I start to wander into something that is really not my area of expertise. So, Caroline, was there more you were going to say?
The complex itself is large. It's like 850 units here, and literally I have, Amazon right here. But for people with disabilities, it's a good area to live because you can reach Costco, a mall, grocery stores,
right,
public transportation, but it's expensive. And they renovated like the lobbies within the past few years that I've lived here, which were completely inaccessible to those with any kind of mobility issues. That's been done. They have upgraded a lot of the units as far as door openings and things like that to be more accommodating. This just happened. We were on a meeting. It's JPG Associates or something out of the district, I think, that literally bought the properties. So it's just happened. I just was on the Zoom thing. And they're going to take some of the units and move them into affordable housing levels, I guess you would say. And I sat there listening to this. I'm like, I wonder if that's going to include anything as far as disabilities, because it is so many units right here. And, definitely an area where someone, who would need accommodations and all could. And what I had posted earlier about the voting, where I'm sent to vote, I have no idea how anyone would reach that, even reach the building. And inside that building hasn't been renovated. And it's like 3 little steps up here, 3 little steps down here, and down hallways to get to the actual section where the voting is. And I've always found that very interesting. And I've never seen any indication or any activity as far as curbside voting there.
right,
So
right.
just something of an older, an older area.
Right.
Challenge.
Absolutely is. Absolutely is.
But it'll be interesting to see what happens with our units.
Yeah. Well, it seems like this should be something that the Disability Law Center pursues some additional funding and some additional expertise so that we can assist with the housing issue, because I know it's a significant one for people with disabilities in particular. So.
Colleen, Shannon Wood from the National MS Society is asking if there is a curbside voting bill in the Senate. Was that the one that Senator Favola?
There is, Shannon, as far as I know, there is no Senate patron for our curbside voting bill. We did try, we reached out to a couple of senators who said that they would be interested in it, except that they had reached their limits already. So I know Delegate Price was hoping to get a couple of sponsors of it, but I don't believe she did. I think it's just on the House side. You know, as a part of legislative strategy, it's a good idea to have sponsors on the House side and on the Senate side, because then you get two chances to get it right. But with the very strict bill limits that many senators and representatives or delegates are working under, it's not at all common this year. It's not at all uncommon to have it only popping up in one house or the other. So we're not too worried about the fact that it's only on the House side right now. Anybody else got anything for us? Let me tell you a little bit about how to reach us. If you learn of something that we need to know about, the best bet is to send it to our information email address, and that's info@dlcv.org. Those emails will be sent to me, will be sent to Jenny, will be sent to Rhonda. And the reason why it's important to send it to that info and not to just one of the three of us is because you're not going to be able to keep track of whether I happen to be out with the flu right now, and whether Rhonda's got a family emergency that she's dealing with. So we'll get things covered if one of the three of us is out of commission for whatever reason. But the best way to make sure your interest gets to us is to send it to the agency at large and not to individuals here. Another thing you can do, you should do, is follow legislative highlights on our website. We will post those daily, sometimes a couple times a day. And we'll also be circulating links to those updates on our Facebook page and on our Twitter. So our Twitter feed. So, follow us on any of those things. And really, if you see anything, if you hear about something in the newspaper, anything at all that's like, this is something DLCV should know about, please let us know. And if you think we already know about it, let us know anyway, because a lot of stuff is appearing in legislative services today, tomorrow, Wednesday. A lot of things are all of a sudden appearing, and we're going to struggle to stay ahead of it all, but we may not be able to stay ahead of it all. So please do let us know. And hopefully if you're telling us something and it's redundant, that'll just make us feel a little bit better that we have our act together.
A couple of other notes of interest. I mentioned this in the chat box, but if you're not monitoring the chat, we do have a podcast, and we have a couple of podcast episodes that might be of interest to folks on the call. If you are interested in hearing what's going on, a little bit more about what's going on in the General Assembly this year, we've got a new podcast premiering tomorrow about the 2021 General Assembly session. And then we also have a podcast that was recorded last year that is all about this understanding the state budget. So if you go to our website at dlcv.org/podcast, all of our podcasts are linked on that page, and you can find those two on there as well.
That's great. Thanks for that plug. Anything else, Rhonda, in the chat?
No, I don't think. Stephen mentioned that low-income housing is an ongoing problem that has nothing to do with COVID. And then also, I'm trying to scanning to see if there's anything else that we missed. Yeah, I think that was it so far.
Great. There's also another email address that you might want to use if you've got stuff that you know is going on in the General Assembly, and that one is very cleverly named ga@dlcv.org. So that's General Assembly, ga@dlcv.org. So you can use that if there's something you need to let us know about, or you can use the info@dlcv.org.
There's also one other item of just a quick announcement. We just got notified that tomorrow there is going to be at 9:30, the House of Delegates is providing a Zoom session about engaging in committee and subcommittee virtual meetings.
Oh, good.
Should we send that out to everyone that registered for today?
Let's post that on our Facebook page. So if you're on that, yeah, we can send it out to everybody who's on this, I think. I don't want to speak for the people who organized this, but.
I mean, I've got all the addresses. I can do it as well. so
Okay,
it's not a
okay.
problem.
Good. That'd be great. All right, so stay tuned, everybody. Please follow our highlights on our website, on our Facebook page. And please keep in touch with us as the session goes on. And thanks so much for your interest in DLCV's legislative advocacy. All right, we'll sign off.